So if you're new to whiskey, how do you get past the raw ethanol alcohol smell and taste for that matter? I'm Daniel Whittington. I'm the Chancellor at Wizard Academy and Whiskey Marketing School. This was a question from, and I copied it here, John Dyer 8385. And he said, or she had, have a question when I try and smell the nose, all I smell is the alcohol. Is that normal? Or am I using the wrong glassware? I had a great experience with Macallan 18 sherry, but on both I can only get alcohol. Should I put the whiskey in a cooler or make it colder? Thanks for your help. Hoping not to be hopeless. Yeah, you're not hopeless at all. And by the way, questions in the comments that are like real questions about whiskey or about history, they're very helpful to me for prompting what would be a cool thing to talk about next. So I do read every single comment in these videos, and if something in there is like, oh, that's a great thing, we should talk about that on camera, then I'm gonna read your question and it's gonna be the topic of a video. So, when you are new to alcohol, and maybe not even new to alcohol, like maybe you're a beer drinker or a wine drinker, but you're new to hard alcohol, you are going to be super sensitive to the dominant characteristics of high-proof alcohol. And the dominant characteristic of high-proof alcohol is ethanol-based. Even though it's only, say, 40% ethanol and 60% other things, which includes water, the biggest nose impact and taste impact is going to be that 40+% ethanol. Now, ethanol is not a single thing. Ethanols, there's various types of ethanol. And as you distill, you go down through the various levels of ethanol. And here's another thing. Along with that, ethanol is a molecule that's sort of, oh God, the chemists are going to hate me for this sentence, but it's sort of a binder that holds other chemicals that produce or provide the smell and palate impact and thing of whiskey. But fundamentally, ethanol's trying to kill you. And your nose knows it, and your tongue knows it. And so when you're new to alcohol, your body's safety receptors, and by the way, this is not just because alcohol is trying to kill you. The same thing happens with capsaicin and peppers and hot peppers. Those are defense mechanisms by the plant. Your brain and your tongue are going, hey, 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 this is dangerous. And you're going, I know, I like this kind of danger. Ooh, it's so hot. Alcohol activates the pain receptors in your tongue, and it sets off alarm bells in your nose, and it will smell really strong, and it's your brain's way of going, hey, 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 careful. This is potentially a poison. This is trying to kill you. And that's all you're going to smell at first. There's a couple ways to get around that, but the goal line, believe it or not, is just to keep smelling. And I don't mean in one session, but I mean it could take weeks, it could take months, it could take days. I've never seen it take less than days, but there's going to be a moment as you're smelling where for weeks at a time, every time you smell, you're just like, oh, yeah, it's just ethanol. It's always ethanol. But you're trying, and you're like trying to write other things down, and you're doing it with friends, and they're saying, I smell this, and you're looking for it, and you're thinking, maybe. And then one day, it's almost like your brain flips a breaker. And have you ever lived anywhere where there's a lot of noise, like in a major city where you get a lot of road noise and sirens, or by train tracks where you get train sounds? At first, when you get to that place, you're like, how am I ever going to sleep here? This place is so noisy. But within a couple of months, you don't hear anything. And if any of your guests or friends come over and stay the night, and they're like, dude, how did you sleep? It's so loud here. And you'll think, wait, what? Same thing happens with kids. You have kids, at first, it's like, it's nonstop chaos and noise and crying. But pretty soon, all that becomes background noise to you. And other people will come over and there'll be a kid crying in the background. And it's the kind of cry that you know is they're not hurt, they're just whining. And it'll turn into background noise for you. And your friends who don't have kids will be like, how do you handle this? And a part of you is going, yeah, you're right, it is crazy. But another part of you is going, handle what? Your brain is a pattern recognition machine whose job is to ignore sensory data as quick as possible because there's way too much sensory data coming at you on a daily basis. If you paid equal attention to all sensory data, you would go insane. This is actually the basis of a whole lot of like tactile sensory disorders, is the brain's inability to turn things into background noise. Man, that's an oversimplification, but as quick as possible, your brain will take something that's a constant and start ignoring it so that it can be prepared for the new things. And so the more you smell and the more you do small tastes, the more that ethanol punchiness becomes a background noise. And all of a sudden, one day, snap, your brain will go, oh, I smell the fruit, and and all of a sudden, all those other things will show up for you. And it really is not a gradual thing. It really is a not working, holy crap, there it is. And I've been in tastings where it happened, in the moment where it happened to somebody, and it was just a light bulb. Now there's another thing I'm gonna talk about after we talk about this whiskey, which is why is it that lower proof and column still whiskeys smell and taste more alcohol than pot still higher proof whiskeys? I mean, to us within a certain window. We're going to talk about that in a second. First, we're going to talk about Slane Castle. We did this one a long time ago on the channel, but this one has been coming up in the comments and in social media conversations, not in like promotionals, around people going like, what's a really great accessible Irish whiskey? Kind of an introduction to Irish whiskey. And Slane Castle keeps popping up over and over. When we reviewed it last time, it wasn't new, but it was newer. Now it's stuck around. Now, for those of you who don't know, Slane Castle is a famous castle in Ireland. And the owning family, and man, I forgot to write his name down. Anyway, he decided to turn it into a music venue. And he wanted to have an amazing, famous, massive music venue in Ireland. It's located about halfway between Northern Ireland and Dublin, so north of Dublin. And he did it. It's a world famous destination music venue now. We were just saying right before we started this video, the concert of U2 playing there is a great one. I've seen the Foo Fighters videos of the Foo Fighters playing Slane Castle. Man, there's just so many great shows that are going on there. And from what I've read, I've never been, from what I've read, it's a really great experience. Well, just like everybody else for the last 5-8 years, everybody wants a whiskey brand. One, because it really is another way of promoting yourself in the world, but also it's another income driver. And as long as you've got an already dedicated fan base, then it's a very easy way to launch into an entire industry. Yeah, this is why you're seeing famous musicians and famous actors getting into spirits industries. So they got into it with this release. Slane Castle, don't know who's making it. I never called and asked, but they're calling it triple casked. And the 3 casks are Oloroso Sherry, Tennessee whiskey, so either Jack Daniels or Dickel barrels, but it's Brown-Forman is the company that owns this, so you do the math. And new oak, virgin oak, new oak barrels, evidently. So that's a very interesting thing. In the nose, it is much less brittle and shiny than a lot of Irish whiskeys in this price point. I think it's softer. It's got way more of the lighter fruit, like the pineapple sort of almost citrus fruits. Almost lemon and zest, but not quite. And almost like, oh man, I wish there was something in between apricot and pineapple. It's not mango. Mango has some strong characteristics of its own, but it's in a melon direction almost. And then surrounding that is this sort of like floral, gardeny kind of light honey sweetness. It's actually really nice nose. It feels a little bit thin. Like the nose presents all those things, but it does it almost like a spray mist bottle. where it's just like, oh, it's kind of in the air, but it's not a density of smell. It's just, oh, there was a misting of smells. It does smell a little more alcohol forward. Oh, and I am getting why everyone digs this. Softer palate, kind of a light cream, vanilla. Not a lot of complexity, but very approachable. Yeah, there's a little dryness at the very, very end that I'm going to assume is the impact of the virgin oak aging. And I think this is either all column still or a mix of pot and column still or single malt and Irish whiskeys. Don't know what kinds of whiskeys. Remember, I don't know that we've done a video on the types of Irish whiskey. Did we do a video on pot still? What is pot still whiskey? I feel like we did. Anyway, unmalted barley. And then column still is the same as like the grain whiskey style in Scotland, Ireland, or in America we call it light whiskey. More people are using the terminology grain whiskey here now. And then there's classic single malt, which is just malted barley, pot still. I had this whole experience. This is a really great introduction, by the way. This is a really great introduction to Irish whiskey. I agree, for the people who have said that. I had this experience where we were proofing down a whiskey, trying to find the right proof. And what we found is in the high 60s, it was like, whoa, bam, but mostly in the palate. And the nose was rich and amazing, but kind of alcoholic. And then you got down into the high 50s to low 50s to like 48, 49, and it got beautiful and rich and dense. And then it got down to the low 40s, and it smelled significantly more alcoholic, even though it was objectively lower proof and less alcohol. So why? So I started calling around to my sensory friends going, I've noticed this for years, and I've never actually sat and thought about it, but I have a theory as to why lower proof smells more alcoholic. Why would a cask strength redbreast smell smoother and softer when a 40% Jameson smells alcoholic? So I asked this question of all my friends, and then they threw out some ideas, and I said, here's my theory, and I posited it, and every one of them went, yeah, that makes sense. That could be true. Now, I have no scientific evidence of this, but my theory is that the higher proof alcohols, they hold more other compounds, right? The non-alcohol compounds, the things that provide rich nose and rich palate. The higher proof, the more of those compounds are bound together. As you add water and you lower the proof, you fracture the bonds of a lot of those scent and taste and palate molecules, and they sort of become water soluble or they evaporate out. And so you actually lessen the amount of things there are to smell and taste in the glass. But ethanol is still there and it's still dominant. So my theory is that if you're in a dense populated wood and mixed into it are all these oak trees, it feels like you're in the woods and there's some oak trees. But if you clear cut almost everything and leave behind a whole lot of oak trees and then cut out a whole bunch of other crap, when you walk through, what are you going to experience? Man, there's a lot of oak trees in here because it's all that's left. So I think that what happens is, this is my personal pet theory that I don't have any science to prove it. Maybe someone, like one of my friends, Reed, could give us the science for it. I think that as you isolate ethanol out and you eliminate a lot of the other things, ethanol alcohol is still there, or ethyl alcohol is still there, strong, 40%, and it just dominates what's left. So, how do you get around that? Remember I said in the first part, you've got to just keep smelling until your brain turns it off, but there are two ways that you can sort of help yourself. One, don't smell so close. If you smell and you're like, ooh, alcohol, back it off. And I mean just like tiny increments until you start to smell other things that are not ethyl alcohol. Then add water. And by add water, I don't mean like I do, which is super sloppy and like dump some in. I mean, get a straw, take drops, add a couple of drops, and keep doing, taste it. Keep doing that until the alcohol has lowered enough that it's not the main thing you taste. and then work your way backwards from there as you get used to it. I hope that's helpful. I'm really glad you're here. Cheers. If you're gonna smell the whiskey, then smell the whiskey while liking and subscribing.